Today on Energy Contact, everybody's into muscles. Today we're going to learn how thought creates and shapes muscles, and how our muscles shape our bones, and how all of that shapes us physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, energetically, every way. So let your body take the shape of your favorite chair for the next half hour, because we're doing our warm-ups. It's what's coming up right now on Energy Contact. Hello, and welcome to Energy Contact. My name is Joseph Willenbrink. Thank you for joining me today, and thank you to the production staff here in the studio for helping me get my message out to you. Energy Contact is a series I'm presenting to you as a public service. It's about attaining perfect health, growth, happiness, self-improvement, and realizing your full potential. It's designed to present you a new way of looking at yourself, and a new way of looking at the world around you. We're talking about things that have to do with making an energetic contact with yourself internally and with your environment. There's no difference between the body, the mind, the spirit, the emotion, the intellect, the ego. There's no difference between mass and energy. These things are all exactly the same. There is something about us that loves to categorize, classify, take one little cell out of the whole, put it under a microscope, look at it and think we know everything. But in fact, all that health and self-improvement we're talking about takes place when we do just the opposite. It happens when we put these things together, when we make an energetic contact between the physical world and the unseen one. We're presenting on these programs a brand new paradigm that's thousands of years old. We're presenting extraordinary topics for ordinary people. And let's move right ahead with that. Let's bring up our first slide. Everyone please understand that I am not a doctor. This show is not a medical advice show, medical talk show, medical help show, anything like that. Couldn't be further from it. Now, I call myself an energy healer, a chakra healer, things like that. So might a lot of other people. So might you if you come to me. But state, federal, and local governments absolutely do not. And it's important to understand that. There's a lot of important information on your screen right now. Please read all of that with your full attention if you will. But when you've got it down, now would be a great time to locate a pencil and paper. Here's why you want to do that. At the end of this show, we're going to run some credits, and on those credits, there's going to be contact information for me. Now, I invite and encourage you to contact me. I'm sort of hoping that something I have to tell you today might inspire you to want to do that. But in order to contact me, you're going to need that contact information. In order to get it, you're going to need a pencil and paper. There'll be plenty of time to jot that stuff down if your pencil and paper is ready. All right, let's come back up here. Today's show is episode number 9 of Energy Contact, and if you're tuning in for the first time today, well, thanks and welcome. These shows are sequential. They build. So we're talking about things today that we've introduced and explained and defined previously. There's some ramp-up things, some up-to-speed stuff that you will have missed out on. However, I do my very best to make sure that every program has a lot of value on a standalone basis. So you'll get a lot out of today's information all by itself. However, if it is your first time and if what you see piques your interest, well then I will invite and encourage you to look around, because there will be earlier programs airing at later times, either re-airing on this station or on in different days and times in different areas. And if you look for them, I'll appreciate it. And now, it's time for me to bring my co-host on camera. Let's get Slim on. I'm going to introduce my co-host Slim to you. Here he is. This is Slim, and he is here for a reason. Since we're investigating what it is that the energy and the contacts in the physical self, we've got to know a few things about a few things, don't we? We've got to know something about energy, and this show's all about energy. But all of that energy out there somewhere does us no good whatsoever. It does us no good until we bring it into focus, until we bring it into contact with something. My pal Slim here is here to help us understand what that thing is that the energy contacts. Remember, a body without energy is just a corpse. And energy without a body, well, it might be a number of cool things, but none of them are human. All right, previously on Energy Contact, we have introduced and investigated something we're calling the body intellect. We've seen how the same materials we were always told they were brain things, the things that give us thought, reason, recall, memory, logic, intelligence, all those things, we've discovered that they are in fact in every cell of our body. They permeate, saturate every cell of us. At conception, we started as one cell, and that cell split into an identical pair, and that kept happening. And one cell went to your brain, and one cell went to your belly. Identical cell, same information, different places. This is one of the most important concepts that we'll explain on Energy Contact, and we'll be looking at it far into the future. We've also looked at skeletons recently on Energy Contact, and we have discovered that your skeleton is not the framework that holds you together, as you've always thought. In fact, it's you who holds it together. That's why Slim here has bolts and screws, and you don't. If Slim didn't have his bolts and screws, he'd just be a pile of bones on the floor. Well, you don't, and you aren't. We have other stuff to hold our bones into place. Bones, as we have learned, are the product of something called mesoderm, and we'll get into that just shortly. But particularly, we saw a couple of main bones, didn't we? We saw these guys here, our main horizontal and our main vertical structure. You can see them on Slim too. Our spine, our main vertical structure, and our pelvis, our main horizontal structure. And these things, like every other bone in us, work as spacers. They're not our framework, they provide space. Something to make our hand be at a distance from our shoulder. Our bones don't hold us together, but they do shape us. We've learned that our bones, and the rest of us too, are all animated by a set of internal forces, acted upon by external ones, all at the same time. The internal forces animate us, and the external forces push and pull us around. They're the kisses and the hugs and the bumps and bruises of life. And so through all that, we've begun to see how thought is creating anatomy right now. First, atoms became cells, and then cells became clusters, and clusters became tissues, and then tissues became organs and bones and nerves and whatever. And all during this process, we set up our strengths and we set up our weaknesses. We set up our aptitudes and our Achilles heel. And in fact, 1 million people will set up their strengths and weaknesses in 1 million different ways. And that brings us to today. And today's show is another anatomy class. We know that bones shape us. Today we're going to see how muscles shape bones. We'll discuss the relationship a little bit between muscle and bone, how they work with each other. Now, why are we interested in all this dry anatomy on a energy healing show? Well, because we want to see how we built ourselves unawarely. And when we do, we'll become aware. And then we'll be able to rebuild ourselves, this time to our specifications, to the way we want to be. Dry anatomy comes alive when it combines with that body intellect. And this is the key to how our thoughts shape our bodies and how our bodies shape our thoughts. Today, we're going to investigate this just in the context of a few foundational bones and muscles, how they relate. We're out of the womb today, but we're still looking at ourselves in infancy. We're looking at ourselves as babies, as toddlers. And that's where we're headed today. But first, we've reached the part of the program where we get to stop for a minute. We get to take a little break. Now is the part of the show where we get to take our virtual field trip, our journey in our mind's eye, like we do about this part of every show. And for today, we're going to return from our visualization from last show. If you recall, we saw a great-grandmother and great-grandbaby taking a walk together. Baby is about 2 and great-grandma is somewhere in her 80s. Now, due to where each one of them is in their respective place in the life cycle, they're both walking very slowly, very naturally, but for very different reasons. Now, if you were with us last show, you saw how Baby fell a lot. Sometimes he fell down and he cried, and nobody really cared much. You know why? Because Baby's just learning to walk. It's a natural part of the process. But then during this walk, Grandma fell. And a bunch of people gathered around to make sure she wasn't hurt, to make sure she was okay. All right, so that's where we were. Today, we're going to see what happens as they walk on a little further. So there they are going along, and then all of a sudden, Baby starts to slow down. and he starts to twist and moan a little bit, and he contorts his frame, and then finally he stops completely. He grabs at his low abdomen, and he grabs at his crotch, and if you look closely, you can see every muscle in his body is flexing. His stomach muscles harden, his neck bulges, his whole form contorts. And that sour expression on his face, it's getting sourer and sourer. What's up? Is something wrong? Do we need to call 911? No. Not at all. Baby's got to go. That's all. Baby's got to poop. Baby's being toilet trained. And he knows that he gets lavishly praised for performing a ritual that he knows as holding it. And he gets scolded if he doesn't. And he wants to succeed. He wants to please. He wants to be a good boy. But what that means is right now he's fighting with his body. And right now his body's winning. Hold that thought. Today, we are talking about muscles. We don't have time to get into the details of muscles, but we're going to get a conceptual overview of how they form and how they form us. And to do that, let's get right to Slim for a second. We're going to see, first on Slim, take a look at his bones and muscles. Let's get Slim on here. There he is. And you can see his main horizontal structure and his main vertical structure. And just the entire bone network that is Slim. And now we're going to see how Slim's muscles work. And in fact, muscles work like a rubber band. I want to show you. We're going to take Slim's arm here and show you. Really, muscles, you can think of muscles like a rubber band here. This is all they do. We've got a muscle on Slim here, and as he moves, it allows for that motion and to come back. Can you see how this muscle just allows that to come back, and when we release it, it comes forward? That's basically a muscle function. It's the function of all of our muscles. Muscles convert energy into motions. And while that sounds like an energy contact concept itself, it's in every elementary anatomy book. Muscles account for nearly all of our motion. This mesoderm that we're going to talk about, which is largely muscles, accounts for 100% of our motions. And muscles are a lot of it, both internally and externally, all of our motions. But muscles only know how to pull. Muscles do not push. Now this is a difficult concept for some people, and they say, wait, what are you talking about? I know how to push. Well, maybe you do, but your muscles do not. They only pull and release. All of your movement and even your pushing comes from muscles stretching and relaxing. That's it. That's all they do. Did you ever try to push something with a rubber band? Probably not, because you wouldn't get very far with it. You can pull things with a rubber band all you want. You can pull Slim's arm over here, but rubber bands don't push. Well, neither do muscles. Last show we saw that our bones don't support us, but we see now that muscles do provide us our form. Why? Because they provide us shape and they provide the space over which things operate. So, muscles know how to release. And now you know why your yoga teacher wants you to release. Now your muscles are very strong whether you work out or not. A lot of people like to work out, but they're strong whether you do or not. And muscles will shape your bones the way braces shape teeth. Over time, they move things. Now a lot of people want hard muscles. Speaking of going to the gym, they want to be a hard body. They want to be an Iron Man or an Iron Woman. But muscles are not made to be armor. They're not made to be shells. Healthy muscles are stretchy. As we are active, as we move, our muscles become less like armor, in fact, and a little more like rubber bands. And when we stop moving, our muscles get stiff, and our muscles start to behave like bone. How can this be? How do they make that transition back and forth so much? Well, it's because muscles and bones are basically the same thing. They're subdivisions of the same thing. They're both mesoderm. Let's quickly review what mesoderm is. And to do that, we're going to return to the womb just for a second. Back in the day, back right after conception, when you were just a zygote, your cells started dividing, and within 3 weeks, they divided into 3 layers. Every cell that's in you right now came from one of those 3 layers. Scientists call those layers ectoderm, endoderm, and mesoderm. Don't let those terms fool you. They're they're not intimidating terms really. It's very simple. We're going to explain it. The ectoderm is the outer layer of us. It becomes skin, nails, tooth enamel, mammary glands, nervous system, and the brain. Ectoderm defines us as something different than our environment. It's the shell of the M&M. It keeps the inside in and it keeps the outside out. It's the reason that I don't melt into this table I'm leaning on here. That's ectoderm, and on the inside is the inside layer called endoderm. Endoderm is the tissues that will become liver, pancreas, bladder, lungs, trachea, much of the reproductive system, things like that. The endoderm converts the outside world into us. This stuff here, it's just last week's garbanzos. And what transformed it was your endoderm. If the ectoderm is the container, the endoderm is all of that formless stuff that's contained. It's guts and goo. It's stuff that if it didn't have the ectoderm to contain it, it'd just sprawl out all over the place. About now you're thinking, yeah, that's nice, but where's Slim in that? Well, that brings us to the third layer, the mesoderm. The mesoderm is what Slim is. Mesoderm becomes bones, muscles, fascia, blood, cartilage, tendons, ligaments, things like that. And then it becomes kidneys, heart, gonads, inner teeth, other bits and bytes like that. So Slim is all mesoderm. But there's a lot of mesoderm that's not on Slim. Mesoderm provides us motion. It provides us structure, support, motion, locomotion. That's all it does. And it's the only part of us that does it. Nothing in those other two layers moves. Not at all. Not unless it's the mesoderm that moves them. What makes life is locomotion, huh? That's what makes us different than a corpse. And so our mesoderm is what provides us with life. It does the bidding of all those internal forces that animate us. And oh, by the way, not only does it provide us structure and movement, it also is the reason that we don't look identical. It provides us the form that makes us look different one from another. Now hold that thought for a second, and we're going to change gears for a bit. We're going to bring up a slide. What you're going to see here is a slide that is going to demonstrate how muscles and bones work together. There it is. If you would ask a city slicker like me, what holds up a tent, that person might say, well, the tent pole, of course. And he would be absolutely wrong. Ask an experienced outdoorsman, or maybe this Boy Scout here, and he'll say, well, here's what holds up a tent. It's the left side, it's the pull of the left side of the tent that holds up the right side, and it's the pull of the right side of the tent that holds up the left. And he is absolutely right. Bones are like tent poles. They do not hold up the tent, but they do give the tent its shape. They provide a fulcrum. They're the spacers across which muscles pull, or which, in this case, the tarp pulls. The muscles here are represented by that tarp, by that tent material itself. And in their proper functioning, they're not shells or armors. They create motion by pulling and releasing against each other across the fulcrum that bones provide. Imagine two Boy Scouts in this picture having a tug of war across that, with that tarp, across that top tent pole there. Muscles pull and release only. And in order to do so, they have to be elastic. Let's move right to our next slide. And what you'll see here is a big muscle. There it is. See that big muscle there? We're going to look at more of that soon. But for now, notice that it's doing the same thing that the tent is. You can see there those two big muscles going up the side. It's the left muscle that keeps the right muscle that pulls you from pulling you out of whack, and vice versa. It's a seesaw, a constant tug of war. It's yin and yang. Can you imagine what would happen to you if one of those two muscles in you just disappeared? Now remember, there are other actors in this play, the ligaments and the fascia and stuff like that, but we're keeping it simple for now. Also know that muscles over time need maintenance, or they'll end up either too stretched out or too brittle, like great-grandma's muscles are. Muscles can be stretched out of shape chronically, and then they become less like our rubber bands, and they become more like saltine crackers, or like the elastic band on an old stretched out pair of underwear. All right, let's leave this for right now and come to a third slide. And we're going to look at some numbers real quickly. You can see at the top of your screen all those huge numbers. We've looked at them before, but they're really too huge for us to get our heads around. Let's go down to that third bullet point there, and you'll see that a human body has 206 bones. In fact, most of them are tiny little bones in hands and feet and stuff. So there are really about 12 bones or so, about a dozen bones that we're interested in on energy contact that provide our main structure. It's noteworthy that our baby that was walking, he might have up to 275 bones. Some people say infants have up to 350 bones. Nobody really knows because they're so formless. Nobody can figure it out. Now, a human body has over 630 some odd skeletal muscles. There are other kind of muscles, but for our purposes, skeletal muscles are what we think of when we think of muscles. Alrighty, let's come back up here. What does this have to do with baby and grandma? Let's get back to them. Remember that baby is being toilet trained, and he knows he gets rewarded for performing that ritual that he understands to be holding it, and he gets scolded if he doesn't. Now, this toilet training ritual, it is a muscle control ritual. We're telling baby how to work his muscles. Now, for whose benefit is that ritual? Is it for babies? No, of course not. It's for mom and dad and grandma and great-grandma. They're all anxious to have baby toilet trained as early as possible. Why is that? Well, it's because of bragging rights, or because of the unpleasantness of dealing with diaper changing, or because of societal norm. It's just what we do. There's a lot of reasons for wanting baby toilet trained early, and all of them are bad. Remember last show we showed a picture of baby wearing one of those extra thick, extra absorbent disposable diapers? Let's show that again. Let's bring up that slide. And you can see baby here learning to form his muscles. Where's that slide? Let's get that up there. It's coming. What we're going to see when it gets here is another view of baby, and we're going to see another view of our main horizontal and vertical structures. There it is. There you see our main horizontal and vertical structure, the spine and the pelvis. Notice again that that spine looks a little like a snake. And then over on the side, you see baby, who's building his muscles and bones. He's ostensibly walking forward, but that's not where his feet are going. Look at his feet. Where are they going? Where are they heading? Why doesn't baby just put one foot in front of the other and aim them in the direction that he's going? Well, we're going to answer that question. Now look up a little bit and look at those extra thick, extra absorbent disposable diapers. Who is convenienced by them? Baby? I don't think so. Not by the looks of this picture. And it explains why it's impossible for him to hold his legs straight, because those diapers are pushing his thighs apart. It's acting like a brace. It's an external force to keep him from getting his feet under his hips. Look at his knees. Now remember, his little bones aren't really bones yet. He's all rubber. And so he's being molded. He's molding himself right now. The cement is still wet. And you know what's molding him right now? Extra thick, extra absorbent diapers. Let's come back up here. Do you think that's shaping his pelvis right now? Do you think that's shaping his spine right now? That's what those guys were doing on there. Do you think that's shaping his muscles? Well, of course it is. Do you think that's frustrating? Do you think that all this builds into his form, his body, mind, spirit, emotion, intellect, ego, and stays there forever? Sure it does. Now you're thinking, wait a minute, Joseph, aren't you getting a little carried away? How can a simple thing like diapers be such a profound thing? Well, it's because there's no difference between all these components. There's no difference, body, mind, spirit, emotion. And so, because of that all-pervasive power of the body intellect, little things reverberate and cause big things. Are diapers evil? No, of course not. Let it be on the record that Joseph from Energy Contact is pro-diapers. Put those things on your baby. But this is just one example of many things of the power of muscles and how our child muscles shape our adult body. In this case, his muscles have to work around curves when they should be working straight. And so his bones and muscles now are more like a bow and arrow than they are like a cohesive unit. And that increases his misshape with every step that he takes. And that gets us back to muscle development and control. Remember, baby's toilet training is a muscle control ritual. And so, brings us back to the same question again. What's the problem with baby pleasing adults by holding his bladder? I mean, after all, we do it. He's got to learn it sometime. Well, one way we can understand the answer to this question is by considering why baby needs diapers in the first place. Some people think it's a matter of communication or teaching, but it's not. They think that early muscle control might demonstrate early development, early intelligence. Well, it doesn't. This is a huge misconception that a lot of adults, that a lot of parents have. They think you need to train a baby like you train a puppy or something. But it's not a matter of training or smartness. Brains and early mental development, they have nothing to do with it. Nothing at all. Muscles do. And babies' muscles aren't developed yet. They're not ready yet. Baby could have Einstein's brain, and he'd still find himself in the same predicament. These muscles aren't ready yet. They're not supposed to be. Bladder control and bowel control are a function of one little muscle group in us. That's all they are. Baby's muscles in that group don't have the information yet. And so he's still trying to figure out what works what. And so in order to complete his ritual, he's borrowing energy from other things. When his hold it muscles aren't developed and he's trying to control himself, well, he's trying to control his bladder with his stomach muscles, even with his face muscles. That's why his face is so twisted up like that. He's performing a chain reaction of unnatural actions. And this unnatural act may shape him forever until and unless he becomes aware and allows his musculature to rebuild. And remember that this is in the foundational stages of the body's development. As the foundation changes, so does everything after it. And remember that this was you once. And this is why, if you find yourself out in the middle of nowhere and you really got to go, your body and your face contort too. Now, according to Eastern mysticism, we'll discuss all that later, this muscle is not only foundational, but it is this area, the bottom of your pelvis, is the muscles of all of your power, all of your personal power. Something the old mystics called Kundalini energy moves up through that, or fails to. We'll learn about all that later. And yet, we've seen that we've trained this muscle to function improperly in most of us. And maybe it's because of early toilet training, and maybe it's because of the fact that we're just generally scared to death. We're intimidated by our own crotches. Why? Well, for all the reasons that are running through your mind right now. And that brings us back to baby, who is not scared of his crotch, at least not yet, but we're teaching him to be that way. And we're covering him with too many diapers, and we're calling that area dirty and nasty, and oh my goodness, go wash your hands. And 10 years later, we're going to tell Junior that that area is dirty and nasty for a whole new sets of reasons. What shapes those cells in the womb, when we were way back in the womb, that shapes baby. And what shapes baby shapes us. And as the foundation is bent, so is the whole structure. And we're going to look more at that next time. But for today, we're out of time. I wish you peace and positive energy and a healthy life in Energy Contact.